could we start just with, so that we fill everybody in, what is fascia and why is it so damn important? Because I feel like it's this one part of the body that does not get enough credit for its impact on our physical and mental health. So let's start with unpacking fascia.
Yes, we will be here all day unpacking fascia because fascia is essentially what packs you together. Fascia is your seam system. Fascia is a fibrous and fluid network that strings every cell of your body together. It suspends every muscle cell and binds them together. It's what helps your organs to be in float within your body. There are so many different components that comprise fascia, but I like to simply say it's your seam system. It's the stitches that hold everything together, but it also gives you your form and shape. And it impacts every single system of the body. It runs through every system of the body. It contains every system of the body. And so there are many different aspects that we can dive into. I think some of the more famous aspects of fascia are its mechanical aspect. So folks like Tom Myers or the Rolf Institute, anatomy trains have brought into focus how this fascia, essentially this stitching fabric, links muscles together from end to end. And so it's really been able to translate well into performance and to functional movement. But, fascia is also a hormonal tissue, which I'll just tease that. It's also a bed for nerve tissue. It houses more sensory nerve endings than your skin or your eyes. Yeah. So we can look at fascia. Once you look at fascia, you have to look at every area of the body and get really interested in this connecting tissue that kind of houses all the things. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is 10 years ago, I became obsessed with detoxing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can see how toxins accumulate in the body as you get older. I read some really interesting research on how when your hormones go through a massive change like they do during perimenopause, that certain heavy metals like lead start to leach out into your circulatory system. They go up into your brain, affect your brain. So I was like, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, I would have been like all about detox. And then I realized something really important, which was that the lymph system has to be flowing well in order for the detox organs to do their job. I feel like the same thing about fascia. We get so clued in on like, oh, I got to eat certain foods to improve my liver, or I need to repair my gut. But organs don't work in isolation. They work with these connective tissues, lymph being one, nervous system being one, circulatory system being one, and fascia being the other one. And I don't understand why we don't talk about it enough because, yes, I hear what you're saying. It holds everything together, but there's also a communication that happens. And when scars happen and injuries happen and the fascia tightens, it affects everything in the body. So can you talk about how fascia is this communication system in our body?
Yeah, so I think we can start really granularly. So I already talked about the big span of the tissue, right? From cell to skin and everything in between. But your fascia is comprised of a number of different cells. A number of them reside in fascia, and a number of different cells traffic through your fascia. But the resident cells, the primary resident cells, are called fibroblasts. And these fibroblasts are like little miniature spiders that tend and mend the fibers of your net, of this fascial net. What are the fibers? The fibers are collagen, many different types of collagen, reticulin, elastin. So there are many different elastic or tensional fibers that comprise this fascia. And so, for example, when we have a wound or an injury or a surgery, in order for blood vessels and nerves to get back to the site of injury, the fasciacytes migrate to the area and they start spitting out collagen and elastin in order to build bridges from one side of the wound to the other side of the wound. And so they end up creating the scaffolding that allows then blood vessels to get in there, for all the macrophages to come in and do the cleanup, and then eventually for nerve endings to be able to supply the whatever it is needed there, whether it's musculoskeletal activity or circulation improvements via the nervous system network. So we have these fibroblasts. And by the way, the fibroblasts are going to be very interesting to you because they're the ones that are sensitive to estrogen. They have estrogen receptors all over them. And we also have this other cell called fasciacytes. Fasciacytes were located, or they were discovered just around 10 years ago by a researcher in Italy named Dr. Carla Stecco, an amazing researcher. Your people should look into her. And these fasciacytes are the cells that spit out the correct chemistry for the fluid environment of fascia. So just like your joints have synovial fluid, right? Synovial fluid is a really popular and known substance that even most people have heard about synovial fluid, that grease for the joints. Well, your fascia has grease too, and that grease is hyaluronan. And so the fasciacytes spit out the right quantities of hyaluronan to allow your tissues to move around each other. Because if your tissues don't glide within themselves, they get sticky, they get stiff, they get stuck, they limit movement, they hurt. And this is what propagates movement dysfunction. This is what propagates stiffness. This helps to contribute to cell death, to sarcopenia, and so many other things. So these fasciacytes are really important. There are also, do you want to ask something before?
No, go. You go. I have a question about estrogen, but go. Yeah, I want to.
Sure. I know everybody's got a question about estrogen.
I know. I have a lot of questions on that.
But you really asked about a communication, right? You asked about, this communication. So the communication, I think we can probably think about the nervous system's load in the fascial tissues. So there are 250 million sensory neurons that end in your fascial tissues. So this is a gigantic feedback loop. And this is happening, within muscles, in the muscle spindles, where these are the stretch receptors, but they're also happening in Golgi tendon organs, but they're also happening at the tendon. They're also happening in many different layers. We have these Ruffini endings, for example, that are sensory neurons that are living inside your fatty layer. They're living inside a layer of fascia within the fatty tissue of your body called the superficial fascia membrane. And so we have a high propensity of sensory neurons all over our body within our joint capsules. These are the Pacinian corpuscles. So it gets really interesting when we start to dive into these smaller and smaller bits of the greater whole.
It's like its own ecosystem, is what I
It is your ecosystem. I would say you're just living in the fascia's world.
Oh my gosh.